All right, guys, what is up? This is Coach Nate and
This is Coach Andrew
with AN Strength Services. Today we're going to be talking about how you should be approaching warm-ups in training for powerlifting. So obviously one of the biggest things to consider is with powerlifting, a lot of it consists of working up to a certain load and making that load feel good and move good, right? A lot of it is just getting stimulus and exposure and just making weight move. So you want to, basically the concept is you want to be able to work up to a certain load and get just the right amount of stimulus and like I just said, exposure, like leading into that top set or whatever load you're working up to, so that you feel good going into that. So like basically today we're going to be talking about finding like the middle ground that you want to achieve in order to do that. And we're going to talk about like the differences between doing that with squat and deadlift versus maybe bench, whereas bench is probably the most different between the three. And because squat and deadlift, for example, are a lot more taxing usually, especially when you get into those heavier numbers. So taking more and possibly more aggressive warm-ups with squat and deadlift could be a little more detrimental than bench, right? So squat and deadlift, and even bench sometimes, I would say a good general rule of thumb is probably, and just to clarify, like, so a top set, like powerlifters utilize top sets a lot, which is a working set that you work up to that is going to be followed by back down sets, which are generally going to be lighter and just more volume, and that's where you put the work in, right? And the top sets are where you get the stimulus. So with the warm-ups, generally like a good rule of thumb is, did I already say 85 to 90?
No, you didn't.
Okay, so a good rule of thumb is probably about 85 to 92% of the anticipated top set. So like if you're working up to 100 pounds, for example, potentially going up to 92 pounds for that last warm-up is going to be a good load to do, right? Especially like more so probably with squat and deadlift. Bench, I would say you could go a little bit more aggressive with it, probably upwards of 95%, maybe even a little bit heavier. And one thing to consider with bench is, like, in a perfect world, right, we would be practicing just singles all the time with all three lifts, because that's what we want to be best at, is expressing maximal strength in singles, because that's what we do in competition, right? So squat and deadlift, however, it's not going to be entirely realistic, because doing those lifts, like doing the maximum amount that you can with those lifts, is going to be way too taxing to be able to do consistently. They're full body movements, the overall tonnage is going to be a lot higher, and it's just going to be way too taxing. Whereas bench press is a lot easier to recover from. It's not full body, it's just upper body, and generally the tonnage is a lot less. So especially in recent years, people have been experimenting a lot more with, for example, like just laying out the basis. So a primary day is generally going to be the heaviest day of the week for a certain lift, right? So your primary bench day is, at least for most people, it's going to be singles, because like I said, singles is something that you can practice on bench pretty consistently. And even like what I was saying is, even in recent years, people have been practicing multiple singles on their primary bench day, because you can express that top end strength, especially if you're adjusted to it. You can express that top end strength even multiple times in one day and still be, not totally gassed from that. So like taking an aggressive last warm up on bench, especially if you're used to taking those multiple singles, like say, even if you were to take like 97% of your last, of your anticipated top set for your last warm-up, you in theory would still be okay to hit like 3% more for multiple singles after that, because you're used to taking 100% of that anticipated primary load for multiple singles, right? So with bench you can be a little bit more aggressive with it. And another thing too is like, for example, let's say you undershoot a top set. So powerlifting is a lot of RPE based, rate of perceived exertion, which is an intensity scale on 1 to 10, right? So a lot of it is like, say say your coach gives you a top single at RP7, right? Say you work up to whatever you think would be an RP7 on that day, but it ends up being a 6. For bench, you could literally just go up. It's not going to be an issue because you're used to taking multiple singles at, you know, the same load, and bumping that up isn't really going to do anything. Whereas like, say squat, for example, say you take a, like you're shooting for an RP7 triple in squat, right? And you hit it and it ends up being an RP6. See, at that point, it probably wouldn't be smart to go up because another triple at a heavier load is probably going to do more harm than good for the remainder of the block, right? Because in theory, you're probably still trying to work up through that block. And also, like, after an RP6 triple on squat, like, you're going to be more fatigued going into the next, like, say if you did like an ascending triple after that, you're going to be a lot more taxed going into that triple than you would be if you did like a single at 97% on bench and then a single at 100% on bench. So yeah, and those are some ground rules, you know, just some stuff to think about when approaching bench warm-ups and squat warm-ups. And then with deadlift, you can be, honestly, like, especially if you, like, for me, I pull conventional, for example. We're gonna have Andrew talk about, you know, like differences in sumo here in a minute, but with conventional, it's generally a lot more taxing. It's very static. So for most people, conventional technique is a lot more lax, like you kind of just pick it up. Whereas squat takes a lot more technique and just general movement to get that skill down, right? So like, taking more warm-ups on squat versus conventional deadlifts can make a lot more sense. I'll give you an example in my training. So I start with the bar on squat. I take the bar twice. I do like 5 reps high bar, and I do 5 reps low bar with the bar. And then I do 1 red, 2 red, 3 red. Sometimes I go, you know, 200 kilos in between 3 and 4 reds. And that's me, right? Because it's nice being able to hone the skill a little bit before you get to that top set, and, you know, also just feel that weight on your back, because at the end of the day, you are holding that weight on your back versus just kind of picking it up. So it's good to be able to feel that. Whereas conventional, I literally start with 2 reds, and that's not even like a flex. It's just like, even 1 red, like, it just doesn't feel like enough weight to really anchor me into position and get an effective wedge there. And 2 reds just feels better than 1 red does. And there's no point in taking the bar or 1 red if it just doesn't feel good. And I'll generally take bigger jumps in conventional too, because again, I'm picking it up off the floor. I don't really need to feel a ton of weight in my hands before I get to that top set. And a lot of the time, you know, it's just gonna be more taxing. Another thing to consider is a lot of, there's some people are big fans of taking bigger jumps in training, warm-up wise, I mean, and some people are more of a fan. And I think Sean Noriega actually was talking about taking more warm-ups in training. There's a couple of reasons for that. So with I think taking bigger jumps in training is a lot more, it's a little bit more risk to reward. So obviously you're not using as much energy. So maybe in theory, getting up to that top set, you might feel a little bit more energized and just fresh going into it, right? But on the other side of that, recently, at least, I've been a lot more of a fan of taking more warm-ups on all 3 of the lifts, because like let's think about competition, for example. So the bigger jumps you take in competition, and it's kind of the same thing with bigger jumps in training as well, but more so in competition because you only get 3 attempts for each lift, right? If you take a really big jump in competition and say you fail that lift, whether it be on strength or technicality or whatever, that's that much more kilos that you're missing on the platform, versus if you are taking smaller jumps on the platform for your attempts, it's less risk, like less kilos that you're risking, right? So like, say you take a 7.5 kilo jump from your second to your third on squat, that's only 7.5 kilos you risk losing, versus like if you take, you know, 20 kilos from your second to your third, which I've done before. But recently, you know, I've taken smaller jumps. And from a competitive standpoint, taking smaller jumps usually makes more sense because of that. And you'll notice a lot of the top level lifters do that more often, especially at higher level meets like Sheffield and Worlds and Nationals and all that. They take pretty small jumps, at least from the second to the third. The second attempt is sometimes what ends up being the one that they end up taking, right? Or end up getting. So, yeah. And if you're taking more warm-ups in training, you're building that work capacity. And so you'll be adjusted, like you'll be ready, you'll be prepared for that on the platform if you have to take a smaller jump, because you won't be like super gassed than you would be if maybe you're used to taking bigger jumps in training. So yeah, and also just skill practice, like taking more warm-ups it technically it's more sets that you're doing. They're not working sets, but it's more sets that you're doing. It's more skill practice, more working capacity. And for me, for example, I love squatting. So taking more warm-ups, that's just more squats that I get to do. So I'm a big fan of taking more warm-ups. But yeah, I think that's kind of it with what I have. And then I think, what would you say about sumo? Like pulling sumo?
I'll get to that in a second. I kind of want to touch base on a couple things you can do for programming, especially for squat and bench, in order to get, more reps under your belt in training without getting too fatigued, right? Especially when it comes to, if you're in a prep or something, you want to feel fresh week to week to week, to eventually, get up to that point of expressing that top end strength. So like ascending sets are like, I've been, coaching for a few years now. And I've started experimenting with a few of my athletes. So if you guys are watching this, you guys can probably back me up on this. But ascending sets on like squat and bench are just so key. Number one, it's that much more reps that you're getting under your belt. It doesn't require you to take as many warm-ups because you can just take your first set. So ascending sets, basically what it does, let's say your max squat is like 200 pounds, right? Just for an example. And you have like ascending sets in terms of RPs. So let's say your first set, you have a set of 5 at RP 6, then you have a set of 5 at RP 7, then a set of 5 at RP 8, right? So your first set could look like 150 for 5, then like 165 for 5, and then maybe like 180 for 5, right? Just like a good example. I mean, that's 15 working reps right there, in the ranges between RP 6 and 8 that you're getting under your belt. So I think it's super important to do that. Obviously every lifter is different, but I've noticed at least you can get the biggest bang for your buck that way. And especially with bench press, I'm a huge fan with it on bench press because again, you can take that very aggressive, you can recover really quickly on bench, and yeah, I can't say enough good things about that. So that's kind of like a workaround as well. And if you're someone who doesn't want to take like 1,000 warm-ups, you can just do like maybe 2 to 3 warm-ups. Then you just do your next 3 sets for your working sets. So that's a good workaround for that, especially if like time is a thing, right?
Yeah. And just to touch on that too, like that's similar, not like 100% similar, but it's a similar concept to taking more warm-ups. Is you're building more work capacity that way because you're doing, the same reps at a certain intensity and then just building up that intensity, building up that load as it goes along, and that increases your intra workout capacity, right? So you're going to be more durable when it comes to competition as well. So yeah, fan of that.
Yeah, and just the more practice you get with heavy weights, the better you become. Like simple as that. Yeah. Like if your body can handle it, do it as often as possible.
Yeah, and if you're also like that's like ascending sets are also good if somebody chronically undershoots, because like if you undershoot your first set of ascending sets, then you just go up more, right? And then you have probably 2 to maybe even 3 more working sets that you're going to get more of a chance to reach the prescribed intensity. So
yeah. And another thing that ascending sets will help with is especially executing the technique at that higher end, in terms of like top end strength. A lot of people, they'll make every rep look perfect until they get to their top end weight, and then technique just kind of falls apart. With ascending sets, I mean, you can range from like 12 to 18 reps of like somewhat similar near top end strength, and you'll usually have your first set look a little wonky, then you go up a little bit, and then that technique is getting refined over time. So again, that's just I can't say enough good things about that.
And you do so one thing you do is, or I don't think you do it anymore, you did have ascending sets on deadlift, right?
I still do. Yeah, I still do.
And so I think the idea with you we're both coached by the same coach, Peter Pyers, and I think his idea with you is the more work you do on deadlift, the more of a rhythm you get into. You're like kind of a rhythm puller. Yep. So if you have somebody like that whose technique gets better as they work up in intensity, like that's something you could consider doing, especially if it's like somebody like
Absolutely.
who's built like Andrew. You know, he's very well built for deadlift, very long limbs, short torso, so he can handle a lot of deadlift volume, and that just kind of helps him refine his technique, and it's not going to be as taxing as somebody like me, for example. I only have 6 working sets of deadlift a week, and that's plenty. If I were to do like a lot more than that, it would end up just being like doing more harm than good. Probably I'd just be really taxed going into other lifts throughout the week. Whereas Andrew, you know, can like how many working sets do you have a week? You have a lot.
No, like 8. Not that much more.
Okay.
It's just 2 extra than you on the secondary.
Yeah. Because you have like 3 ascending sets and then
3 working sets, like, and then 2 back downs, and then primaries, top set, 2 back downs. That's it.
Okay.
Yeah. I have one more thing to say.
Sorry.
No, you're good.
You lose your train of thought.
Yeah, like especially with sumo, I highly like don't recommend ascending sets for conventional, especially. It's just gonna be a lot more taxing for 99% of lifters. And technique usually isn't a big problem. It isn't as big of a problem, at least if you compare it to sumo, in terms of like why you fail to lift, right? Obviously you want to have great technique on both, but more times than not, you're going to run into like a strength problem, or maybe you're just a little bit too gassed, especially when it comes to the conventional pull. So you want to be a little bit smarter with your warm-ups. You're able to take, you know, bigger jumps, just so that way you feel more fresh for conventional. But on the flip side of that, as like a sumo puller, you're able to take, you can take more warm-ups, because again, you want to refine that technique as you warm up and you progress towards those heavier loads. Again, yeah, sumo it's a harder skill to learn and master. So getting more reps under your belt is going to be the key to success.
What about pause singles?
Oh yeah, so pause singles, I love giving those to my athletes, especially a lot of people, especially with sumo, again, they'll run into a problem where like everything looks perfect until they get to near top end strength, then they kind of fall flat. From a technique perspective, right? Whether that's, you know, foot pressure isn't right, if, you know, lockout's a little shaky, or even if it's just like they're not warm enough and it's just too heavy, right? What I like to do is, especially on the secondary days, I'll give pauses, right? But even going into a primary session, right? I'll have my athletes, some of them, I'll have them do every single warm-up paused, and I'll work them up to a pause single, like all the way up to like 92% of what they're gonna hit on the day. So my athlete, Anthony, for example, we've been experiencing that. I gave him ascending sets on the secondary, and if you're watching this, Anthony, yeah, your deadlift's doing really well, so yeah, keep up the good work. But on the primary, I have him doing like a heavy like pause single as a last warm up. And what that does is it ensures that he's comfortable in the bottom position, and we establish a lot of confidence. Because if he smokes that last warm up paused, I mean, remove the pause, go up 8%, I mean, it's going to move the same, if not faster. So we've been having really good experience with that. So
yeah. I have one athlete that actually asked about that. And I don't know if it was you, or I feel like he probably saw a video. I think it was Evan Hawk was talking about. Evan Hawk had an athlete that he did that with, and it was working really well. I feel like my athlete might have seen that, but Miles Carter, if he's watching this, shout out. But so we've recently, like a few months ago, we switched to sumo deadlift for Miles, and we've had some ups and downs with it. Still figuring out the technique. But we hit a pretty good breakthrough this previous block where I implemented some pauses on a secondary, and I had to cap him because he wasn't really focusing on the pauses, and he was like going a little bit too heavy, and the pauses weren't super they weren't very high quality pauses. But so I capped him, but he locked those in, and it really helped. And his technique like we've done one block of that, and it's post competition, and his technique already looks better than ever. It looks great, and the pauses really helped with that. And he asked about maybe doing a pause single in his primary session, like leading into the primary trip. Like he has triples on his primary right now, and I said I told him not yet, but because he feels really good doing the pauses. It makes his technique feel really refined. And I said, I basically told him, like, if that's feeling good, then just do some of your warm-ups paused. Like, we don't need to necessarily do that yet unless we start running into the issue of you getting to your top end like maybe your warm-ups are, like he was saying, you know, your warm-ups are all looking really good, and then as soon as you get to the, you know, more of a maximal level load, technique just falls apart. Maybe like you kind of, your bottom position, just you like lose position in the bottom, right? Then I would be like, okay, last warm-up, pause it. But here, we're not really having that issue. He just feels better after doing some pauses in his, like for example, like when he does his top set pause, it feels really good technically. So basically I just told him to do, like, take the bar, or not the bar, do a red pause, like a few reps pause with a red, and then a few normal reps with a red, and maybe work up to 2 reds and just do, you know, a few reps pause and then a few normal reps. And if that's helping him feel good, keep doing that. And then it, honestly, at that point, he should just feel good going into his top set, should feel more technically efficient. So
absolutely. Yeah, I have like one small thing, and it's a little stupid, but a lot of times everyone just needs to focus at the end of the day. Like, a lot of yapping goes on at the gym, and it's awesome. Like, you know, having a group of people come together, sharing the same interest, right? I think that's amazing. But on the flip side of that, it could work in a lot of athletes' detriments. Like, I'm guilty of it too. We're all guilty of it as powerlifters, right? At the end of the day, right, if you want to take like extra warm-ups to feel good, like reduce the yapping, right? Stay focused. You don't need 10, 15 minutes in between warm-ups. You really don't.
Yeah, you don't need to be spending, you know, 5 hours in the gym. And also, you probably don't need to rest as long as you think you do. Yeah. Especially when it comes to your warm-ups, right? Like, obviously, probably from your last warm-up to your top set, maybe like second to last warm-up, take your time. But like in between that, you can probably speed it up a little bit. And at the end of the day, you're just going to increase your initial workout capacity. So,
yeah. And if you speed up the warm-ups a little bit, like obviously not like every minute, but I think like 3 to 5, you know, for majority of your warm-ups are going to be just fine. Especially, it's going to prepare you for the platform too. If you got to speed up your warm-ups really quick, just to get them all done before you have to do your openers. Yeah. So you'll be a lot more prepared that way. Yeah. So
it's also good to get some just general cardio in, you know. Yeah. Of course, for powerlifters hate cardio, but you don't need to do anything crazy. Just some like maybe zone 1, zone 2 cardio, you know, throughout the week would definitely be helpful for that. So yeah. You got anything else? I feel like I had something.
I thought I did too, but I think that's it for now. I don't know. Maybe not.
Yeah, we've just been yapping, honestly.
Yeah.
But I think that was pretty good. Yeah, comment below if you guys have any questions about your warm-ups. Never mind. So I think there's one more thing that kind of came to mind, and that is applying, like when you should start applying equipment in your warm-ups. And I think it varies a lot person to person. There's people like Austin Perkins, who I think he does full equipment on everything, on squat.
Every single one.
Yeah, every warm-up he does, he has, you know, sleeves, wrist, like for squat, he has sleeves, wrist wraps, belt, every warm-up on squat. And then there's other people who might wait until maybe second to last warm-up to put on their full equipment, right? And I've gone back and forth on it, and I think it's really more of a preference thing, but some good takeaways from either side of that is like, using your equipment is a skill in itself, right? And the more you use it, the better you're going to be at it, right? So like doing every single warm up with all your equipment on, like you're going to be more like, I think you're really going to be the most prepared for your top set that way. But on the other side of that, like doing less equipment will help you appreciate your equipment a little bit more, obviously. So like if you were to do sometimes I'll do 3 reds on squat, for example, without any equipment. It doesn't really feel great, but when I do put that equipment on, it's a pretty big confidence booster. Like when I go into maybe 200 kilos or 4 reds, 220 kilos, it feels a lot better. And I'm like, okay, I'm feeling good now. And at the same time, like having your equipment on for all the warm-ups, like you might kind of just skip that part because you just feel good on all your warm-ups. But also like one thing I've noticed, for example, is low bar squatting. Most people wear wrist straps, right? And that's because obviously you put a lot more strain on your wrist having the bar farther down in your rear delts, right? And I think sometimes wearing your wrist wraps makes us a little bit less conscious of the shelf we're creating on our back, because you're not suffering as much wrist pain as you would be if maybe you're not creating a good shelf without wrist wraps on, right? So when you take away those wrist wraps, you're kind of forced to create a better shelf on the back and just have the bar sit there a little more comfortably. So that's one thing I like about it. Is actually recently I've been doing some of my back downs without wrist wraps, and I think it's helped me to just be a little more conscious of that shelf in my back. And that obviously consists of just kind of keeping that tense and flexed and tight, and that's just going to help you, create a better shelf there. Yeah.
I just have like one thing to point out too. I think you should do it in phases. What I did with this last off season was I started to practice more, like doing more squat warm ups and everything, like no belt, like no equipment, nothing. Now that I'm in prep, I kind of resorted back to putting equipment on a little bit earlier. Again, I want to be, practice having all the equipment on, especially in prep. So I think that's a good way you can kind of view it, right? When you're like in an off season or you're not competing for a long time, I think, practicing, everything with no equipment, I think it's going to help you a lot. It's going to, again, appreciate your equipment a lot more.
Yeah. And you're talking more so like warm-ups, right?
Yeah, like during your warm-ups, yeah.
Yeah. Like if you have a coach and your coach just prescribes you competition deadlift, I think you should be wearing your equipment for that. Right. Unless he prescribes you otherwise. Like I don't like, if I have an athlete, like I prescribe them a, comp squat and they don't put their belt on. I don't really like that because I want them to be able to practice bracing with the belt. But if maybe we're trying to develop more core strength or just a better brace without the belt, then I might prescribe beltless, which I very rarely do. But actually Alan Stewart, I just prescribed some beltless for him. But that's deadlifts. His secondary deadlift I prescribed beltless, but it's also because he gets a lot of like reflux sometimes when he's deadlifting, and I want to see kind of what happens when I take the belt away and see if we can kind of maybe just get a little bit more of a effective brace, but we'll see how that goes.
Yeah, but I would say like just do it in phases. Like if you're a couple weeks out, don't do half your warm-ups with no equipment. That's kind of stupid. I think you need to practice as much as you can with your equipment, but then there's a point in time where you should just, a couple extra warm-ups, just don't use it, because you'll really appreciate and improve your positioning as well, especially for squat. You don't want to obviously rely on just the pop out of the hole with, stiff sleeves. But in an off season, right, you can do a couple more warm-ups and really get that positioning down, bare knee. And that'll really help you.
And like soft sleeves in the off season, I think is a good practice that develops, strength out of the hole, or just make sure you're not super reliant on those stiff sleeves, right? And make sure you're not developing too much of a reliance, on them. And just generally in the off season, you can probably warm up more without the equipment, and then like he was saying, once you get closer to competition, it's probably better to have that stuff on so that you're developing that skill and you've got that skill honed for when you step on a platform with all of your equipment. So
and then what kind of like what he said with like soft sleeves, like if you're in the off season and you still want to progress and maybe hit some PRs in the off season, right? A good thing is you can wear like soft sleeves during the secondary squat day, and then when you go to your primary squat day, you could throw on the stiffs. Right, so you're still having that competition practice on your primaries while also getting stronger, working on some weaknesses a little bit more on the secondaries.
And I will say, if you're going to do that, if you're going to have secondary sleeves on soft sleeves on your secondary day and stiff sleeves on your primary, I would keep it like that for the whole block, because again, using that equipment is a skill in itself, and if you throw that on for the week 4, it might actually end up throwing off your movement pattern. So at least keep it, like if you're going to keep it in at some point in the block, do it for that. Keep it consistent throughout the block. For weeks 1 through 4, soft sleeves on the secondary, stiff sleeves on the primary. Don't switch it up on the week 4.
Yeah, I would even argue keep it in the entire like macro cycle, to be honest. String together a few blocks together to where you just get really good with soft sleeves. And that might bring your top end up like a lot, further than you think you may have it. So yeah.
I do think people probably overhype stiff sleeves. I think like top end strength, if you take them away for a few months, it will be pretty much the same.
The same.
But another thing with bench is like wrist wraps on bench. So I think it's kind of similar to squatting. Like without wrist wraps on bench, I think you're a little bit more conscious of the shelf on your on your palms too, right? And I do think wrist wraps probably actually mechanically help you a little bit better on bench, which might surprise some people, but like it creates more wrist stability, which is going to allow for more force transfer. So if you have shaky wrists during bench, wrist wraps will help stabilize that, and you're going to be able to just drive a little bit harder. But taking them away every once in a while, I think is healthy too. You create a better shelf and probably develop some more wrist stability without the wrist wraps as well. So.
Well said.
Yeah. Anything else?
That's it. Don't yap too long in the gym. Get your stuff done.
Take as many warm-ups as you feel like.
Yeah. And hit some PRs. That's pretty much it.
Yeah. Lift heavy.
Yeah.
Stand up harder.
So we lift heavy, die strong.
Yeah. Lift heavy, die strong.